At 07:43, Clara Dunn stepped through the Pentagon's north entrance with a quiet gait that drew no attention. Her boots made soft contact with the polished floor, the scuffed toes matching the wear on her army green field jacket. She handed over her visitor form to the security officer behind the glass partition without a word. He barely glanced up, his voice flat as he repeated memorized lines about prohibited items, escort protocols, and photography bans. He slid a plastic badge under the gap in the glass, his eyes never meeting hers. Clara clipped the badge onto her jacket with a steady hand. On her wrist, partially obscured by her sleeve, was an old Hamilton khaki field watch. The leather strap was cracked, the face scratched. Time ticked forward, as it always had. She nodded once to the guard and moved into the building, blending in with the rhythm of a place that pulsed with authority and speed. Lieutenant Danielle Briggs arrived at 07:47, 5 minutes late and clearly irritated. She wore her Class A uniform like it was a spotlight, boots sharp, rank bars gleaming, a tablet in hand. She tapped impatiently before glancing up at Clara. Her tone was clipped. "This way, ma'am. I'll be your escort this morning." She didn't hide her annoyance. This wasn't the kind of assignment that earned performance points. Clara gave a polite nod and fell in step beside her without a word. They walked the outer E-ring, the long curved hallway filled with framed military history and photos of decorated generals. Briggs offered commentary she clearly thought was educational, citing ring design, security layers, and the interstitial courtyards between corridors. Clara responded with only the occasional murmur, her expression unreadable. But she was watching. Her eyes moved like a seasoned scanner, noting everything, the angle of each dome camera, the timing between security foot patrols, the placement of passcard sensors. She marked a fire extinguisher set into a wall just before Corridor 5E, and the slight hitch in the motion sensor's sweep above the stairwell. She moved like someone who had once memorized blueprints because her life depended on it. Briggs talked on, unaware. "Civilians usually get turned around in here," she said. "Just stay close." Her voice carried the usual tone of someone used to explaining procedures to people who weren't listening, but Clara was listening. Not to Briggs, but to the ambient murmur of the halls, the click of boots on tile, the barely audible buzz from restricted doors. She heard the undertone of routine and cataloged what didn't fit. They passed a group of Marines outside an Intel Division office. One of them glanced briefly at Clara, looked again, then dismissed her. A grandmother, probably here for a tour. Nothing about her said threat. Her posture was relaxed, her gait even. But she walked with her back near the wall, never with her flank exposed. She avoided stepping into cross-traffic, always placing herself where she had the clearest view of exits. Briggs stopped at a reinforced door and turned. "The general's running late. You can wait over here. There's water if you need it. Please don't leave the area." She said it like she had somewhere more important to be. Clara didn't object. She simply stepped toward the waiting bench, choosing the seat closest to the far corner, with clear sightlines to both entrances. She sat, hands folded, watch face upright. She did not check her phone. She did not fidget. For the next 30 minutes, she didn't move much at all. Just breathed, watched, counted. Her eyes rested a moment on a passing officer's shoulder tab, then shifted to the reflection of a nearby security camera in the glass of a framed certificate. She was not anxious. She was prepared. Outside, the hum of the Pentagon continued. Inside, Clara Dunn sat like a ghost, unnoticed by nearly everyone. A visitor, yes. Civilian, seemingly. But for those with eyes trained to recognize posture, discipline, or habit, something about her didn't quite fit. Not just the old field jacket or the silence. It was the watch, the way it never left her wrist, and the way she wore it. Not as a keepsake, but as a marker. She didn't need to say anything. She had already seen enough. At 08:14, Clara Dunn sat in silence outside a closed conference room in Corridor 4E. The bench was hard, the walls beige and unmemorable, the ceiling lights a little too white to be comfortable. To a casual observer, she looked like someone waiting for an administrative meeting. Maybe about a pension or an old case file lost in federal shuffle. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. Her posture was relaxed but perfectly upright. Her eyes, however, never rested on one spot for long. Voices filtered through the door ahead. Nothing loud, but clear enough to catch pieces when it opened. Then came footsteps. The door swung wide, and a group of officers emerged. Their movements were sharp, purposeful. The lead wore a silver oak leaf and carried a secured tablet under one arm. The others followed in quiet conversation, their tone the familiar cadence of classified talk just barely held behind a curtain. One of them spoke clearly as he passed. Crimson Watch protocol has been authorized. Full implementation by end of quarter. Another officer, younger, asked, "What about the legacy contingencies?" The response was firm. Decommissioned. Permanently. The secretary doesn't want ghosts from the old playbook interfering with modernization. Clara's head didn't turn. Her body didn't shift. But slowly. Deliberately. Her left hand moved across her lap until her fingers rested gently on her wrist. The pad of her thumb found the edge of the worn leather strap. She pressed it with just enough pressure to feel the time pulse back at her. A beat. Another. Her eyes softened, not with sadness, but with calculation. No one noticed. The officers were already walking down the hall, their boots fading into the white noise of the Pentagon. Clara blinked once. Slow. Her gaze followed the reflection of their retreating figures in the glass panel across the hall. She had heard what she needed. For a moment, the air felt still. There was nothing overt in her face, no sign of shock or dismay, just the smallest shift in her breathing, the kind that meant something had locked into place internally, a thread connected, a conclusion drawn. Her thumb lingered on the watch face. She didn't need to look at it. She knew the time. The door remained open. A junior officer held it in place with his shoulder as he scrolled through messages on his secure device. He didn't even glance at Clara. Most didn't. Just a woman waiting quietly. But the room behind him held remnants of a meeting that wasn't meant for public ears. Maps still flickered on the wall displays, one showing satellite overlays of Northern Europe, another centered on Kazakhstan. Red markers blinked, some of them familiar. Clara's attention moved to the displays in passing, never directly. She had learned long ago that focus could betray as much as words. Her hands stayed still, her breathing, slow and shallow, her shoulders, squared but loose. To someone without training, she looked like anyone's grandmother. But beneath the surface, something had begun to shift. Not panic, not fear, just readiness, the kind forged over decades, left dormant, but never truly gone. Her hand fell away from the watch. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them as the door closed again. She didn't move. Not yet. But her awareness sharpened, quiet and patient. Someone had lit a fuse. She had just heard the match strike. At 08:38, the double doors opened and General Marcus Whitmore stepped into the hallway with a file tucked under his arm and a coffee stain on the corner of his collar. He looked down at the papers as he moved, his steps quick, used to multitasking in motion. An aide handed him another folder, briefing him in hushed tones. He nodded once, flipping through pages as he turned into the small waiting area where Clara Dunn sat alone. He didn't look up until he was within 2 steps. His voice was already forming words. Some greeting meant to get this meeting started and over. Then his eyes dropped to her wrist. His mouth stopped moving. The folder slipped from his hand. Papers hit the carpet with a soft flutter. His body didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the worn Hamilton watch. The leather strap weathered, the case dulled by time, but it was the serial number half obscured by the angle of her wrist that froze everything. For 2 long seconds, no one spoke. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't hide the watch or speak first. She just sat there, her arm resting casually on the arm of the chair, as if none of this mattered more than a passing moment. Whitmore swallowed. His throat clicked in the silence. Everyone out. His voice was low. It didn't rise or bark, but the aide knew better than to hesitate. Within seconds, the space was cleared, doors closed. The hall behind them emptied. The general took a slow step forward, not blinking. DW-113, he said, almost under his breath. That was Khaki 7. Clara met his eyes. It still is. Whitmore's face went pale. He reached for the nearest chair and sat without meaning to. His hands fell to his knees. For a moment, he couldn't look away from her wrist. Then finally, he raised his gaze back to hers. You can't be. But I am. Silence held again. Not tense. Not loud. Just dense. There was no need to explain what that serial number meant. It belonged to a unit disbanded on paper, buried under layers of deniability. A unit that no longer existed because the country had decided it couldn't. And yet, Clara Dunn sat in front of him, breathing, waiting. No one said the word resurrection, but in that moment, it felt like one. At Aero 8, 44, General Whitmore ushered Clara down a secured hallway on the second floor, past a coded door marked Restricted Access. The lights dimmed slightly inside the room, and the hum of HVAC echoed against the quiet. He tapped a 4-digit code on a recessed panel near his desk. A soft beep confirmed the surveillance system had been disabled. Clara remained standing. She didn't look around. She had been in rooms like this before. The layout was always the same. 1 desk, 2 chairs, documents that never left the building. Whitmore pulled out his chair, sat slowly, then motioned for her to do the same. She didn't speak right away. The silence held for several seconds. Then she exhaled once through her nose and met his eyes. Khaki protocol, she said. 14 operatives, 12 in Soviet-controlled zones, 2 in alignment territories, all embedded by Q1 of 1988. Full deniability, Tier 0 asset status. Our orders were simple. If Moscow moved first, we were to disrupt launch communications and delay strategic response. Enough time for your side to retaliate. He didn't interrupt. She continued like someone who'd practiced this briefing in her head for years. We were placed near silo hubs, underground command sites, Black Sea nodes. Most of us were deep cover. I was assigned as a rail engineer on the Mozhaisk corridor. Some posed as janitors in early warning posts. One was a cook inside a satellite control relay near Arzemus. Whitmore leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. His voice came quieter than before. We thought you were killed in Prague. There was an explosion. She said, 3 were lost. I wasn't there that night. None of the others were either. Communications ceased the next morning. We assumed extraction would follow, but it never came. Why not? She paused. Her voice didn't change, but her jaw tensed slightly. Politics. Cost. Timing. Maybe they decided the risk outweighed the value. Either way, we were left in place. And after a while, it became clear that the silence was permanent. Whitmore looked down. His fingers laced together. He didn't apologize. She hadn't come for one. So you just stayed? She nodded once. I adjusted. New cover identity, low visibility, minimal contact. The original orders were never rescinded. Until they were, we remained on mission. He shook his head slowly. 36 years. No contact. No supplies. No support. She allowed herself a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. We learned how to improvise. He stood, restless now. He moved toward the window, then turned back. So why come home now? Because something's moving, she said. Something that looks a lot like what we were trained to prevent. Over the past 3 years, I've observed increased movement beneath 3 locations believed dormant, refurbished infrastructure, comms nodes lighting up at irregular intervals, new power signatures, deep cycle generators, fiber routing, and none of it shows on official mapping. You're saying the system still exists? No, I'm saying it never stopped. It just changed shape. Whitmore ran a hand over his face. He didn't speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice had dropped lower. You believe the dead hand has been reactivated? She shook her head. I believe it was never fully shut down. And what's in place now isn't just a relic. It's something new, built on top of the bones of the old one, smarter, faster, and it doesn't belong to any one government anymore. He sat again, slower this time. His expression had changed. The disbelief was gone, replaced by something quieter. What about the others? Clara's face hardened. Some are still out there. Some we've lost. I've kept contact through dead drops, embedded phrases in classified ads, burner routes. But full coordination risks exposure. I came here because I don't know how much longer we'll have. He didn't speak again. The room went still. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. General, the mission never ended. We just outlived the silence. And now it's starting again. At 08:58, Clara reached into the side pocket of her field jacket and removed a sealed envelope. Inside were 6 folded satellite prints, an unlabeled flash drive, and a single page of coordinates annotated by hand. She laid them out on the desk with quiet precision, sorting them by region, Novaya, Zemlya, the Kola Peninsula, Irkutsk, and one unmarked Arctic location beyond the old Grau grid. She pointed to the first image, thermal overlay, dated 4 weeks ago. The ice cover is consistent with seasonal averages, but underneath, heat signatures don't match known infrastructure, sustained output, no surface traffic. The pattern suggests venting from an underground reactor system. Whitmore leaned forward. His eyes tracked the color gradients, the pulsing centers of red in a field of cold blue. Next, she showed the second set. Overhead LEO imagery, staggered across 5 months. At first glance, nothing. Then she tapped 3 positions. Look at the shadows. Micro shifts in topsoil consistent with underground freight or platform cycling. This site was dormant for decades. Now, it's awake. Not rebuilt. Reactivated. He looked at her, jaw tight. How do you know it's dead hand? Because I helped plant the sensors, she said, and because this node shouldn't exist unless something else upstream is controlling it. The original dead hand relied on seismic and atmospheric triggers, but these sites are communicating quietly, indirectly. She slid the flash drive across the desk. Captured signal data. It's encrypted, but the modulation is adaptive, AI-linked. They've integrated autonomous command layers, probably something developed post-2014 during the Kremlin's Black Tier modernization efforts. This isn't Cold War architecture anymore. It's something new, built over the bones of the old deterrent. Whitmore plugged the drive into his secure tablet, scanning the metadata. The timestamps matched NATO flyover schedules. The windows were tight, but Clara had been inside the loop long enough to know when to move. She watched him absorb it. His silence said more than questions would have. She continued. 2 weeks ago, a Khaki asset in Belarus left a drop point message. Phrase match indicated pressure from an internal faction, not state actors. Mercenaries, former GRU, unaffiliated. She paused. Fanatics, not loyal to any current flag. Loyal to the doctrine that if the homeland dies, the fire survives. He looked up, frowning. Are you saying someone's trying to trigger it? She didn't blink. Not just trigger, steer. They're trying to turn the bones of an old failsafe into a new first strike. He sat back slowly. Breath held. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was processing. And how close are they? Clara's voice was calm. Close enough that you'll need to move before you see them coming above ground. This isn't just an intel threat. It's operational, and it's accelerating. Outside the window, morning sun hit the Potomac. Inside the room, the weight of 30 years shifted in the air. Whitmore no longer saw Clara as an old operative. She was the only early warning system they had left. At 09:07, the door burst open with a metallic crack. Hinges pushed harder than needed. Colonel Stephen Drake stepped inside, his voice sharp before his boots fully cleared the threshold. "General, I need you to clear this room. That woman is in possession of falsified clearance tags and has no listed service record. I have OSI on standby. She's to be detained and escorted out immediately." He didn't look at Clara. His eyes never dropped to the watch or the folder of intel on the table. He stood tall, angry, certain. Two security officers stood behind him in formation, hands near their utility belts. One reached for his radio. Clara didn't move. Her face didn't change. Whitmore didn't raise his voice. He stood slowly, eyes locked on Drake, and took one deliberate step toward the center of the room. Then he turned to Clara. His spine straightened. "Lieutenant Colonel Clara Dunn, active duty under provisional status. Special Activities Division, Theater Command 113, Tier 0 Authorization, Codename, Khaki 7. His voice was even. The words were quiet but rang out like gunfire. Drake blinked. His jaw tightened. "That's not possible. There's no such listing." Whitmore's hands moved to his sides. Then, slowly, with full intention, he brought his right hand to his brow. His fingers touched the brim of an invisible cover. His elbow formed the angle exactly right. He held the salute. For 3 long seconds, no one in the room breathed. "I am saluting a ghost," he said, "but one that never stopped serving." The room fell still. The security officers hesitated. One lowered his hand from the radio. The other shifted his weight. Drake stared at Clara like the floor had just tilted under his feet. Clara inclined her head slightly. She didn't rise. She didn't return the salute. She didn't need to. Recognition, once given, didn't need echo. Whitmore dropped his hand. "She's not leaving this building in cuffs. Not now. Not ever." Drake didn't argue again. His posture faltered just enough to betray uncertainty. No one gave another order. The 2 guards stepped back without being told. For the first time since she'd entered that building, Clara Dunn was no longer invisible. At 09:14, General Whitmore stood near the comms terminal, headset in place, fingers moving across a secured keypad. His voice was clipped, not loud but firm enough to carry across the room. "Initiate Broken Arrow. Priority 1 activation. Verification code, Sierra Delta 7125. Romeo." The air shifted. The 8 at the back straightened. The guards refocused. A digital alert flashed red on the central monitor. Protocol Broken Arrow wasn't routine. It wasn't a drill. It signaled the compromise or active targeting of nuclear or strategic assets. Rooms didn't just go quiet after that kind of call. They locked into alert. Every breath turned into timing. Clara remained still, eyes on the screen. Watch angled toward the light. She didn't flinch at the activation. She had known it was coming. "They're not waiting," she said. "They're moving faster than we thought. I've lost contact with Khaki 3, 5, and 9. And today, we were supposed to rendezvous with 6, but she didn't show." A signal tech entered with a field report from a recon team outside Tbilisi. A brown envelope, still warm from the printer. Whitmore opened it. Inside, a photo-charred earth, broken pine, and in the center, a Hamilton watch with a cracked face and scorched leather strap. Clara stepped forward slowly. Her hand hovered over the image. "That's not 6's watch," she said. "That's 4. Henry. He was never on that path. He had safe house protocols in Murmansk. Someone rerouted him." Whitmore's grip tightened. "Meaning they know, not just the program, the names." She nodded once. "And they're pulling us out piece by piece. It's not a panic response. It's strategic removal. Whoever's behind this doesn't want witnesses. They're sanitizing the record before any of us can reach a command post. He handed the photo back without a word. From this point forward, Whitmore said, "No one moves without my order. No internal comms unless air-gapped. I want satellite recon on all known drop sites and former storage depots. Have SOCOM scrub lists of former Russian civilian contractors and AI-adjacent weapons labs from 2010 to now." The aide ran from the room. The lights on the console turned amber. Clara looked around. No longer a relic. No longer dismissed. They had called her back too late. But not too late to matter. At 09:23, Clara sat quietly at the briefing table as the room cleared again. Only Whitmore remained. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, softened by the frost of the reinforced glass. Her hands rested flat on the table. She didn't speak immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. The system was always flawed, on purpose. Whitmore didn't look up at first. His eyes remained fixed on the field report still in his hand, but he heard her. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. "We planted it," Clara said. "Back in '89, Khaki 6 and I had an opening 2 weeks embedded with the secondary engineering group inside a logistics substation near Bryansk. It wasn't much. We were posing as inventory auditors, but they gave us enough clearance to access the circuit load paths. Too much trust. We left a signature behind. A misaligned routing path buried 3 layers deep. It never triggered an alert, because it only responds to a very specific physical sequence." She opened her field notebook and unfolded a schematic sketch drawn by hand. It was faded from age, the edges smoothed by years in a false-bottomed suitcase. Whitmore leaned closer. "This node here," he said, "that's below the command bunker line." She nodded. Under 30 meters of reinforced concrete, steel mesh, and rock. Single entrance. Pressure lock. Probably still wired for high-heat incineration if tampered with. "You think it still works?" "We don't know, that's the point. It was always a failsafe, meant to give us one chance. No remote access, no digital signature, only analog, and only from the inside." Whitmore straightened. His hand ran over his hair. "And if it's active again, then someone has eyes on that node." She met his stare. "That's why we never filed it in any channel. No one outside Khaki knew. That flaw was our insurance. If the day came, we'd know where to go. But it was never designed as a shared plan. Only one of us would be able to reach it before they locked it down." Whitmore understood the meaning without it being said. "You think you can get there?" She nodded once. "I know the path. I kept a civilian identity alive in the region. A safe house with basic gear. Enough to reach the outer perimeter. But once I'm in, I won't be coming out." He looked away, jaw set tight. "You're not expendable." "We all were. That was the job." Clara folded the schematic, placing it in front of him. She didn't touch it again. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm giving you a clock. If the system activates and no one's inside, then there's no stopping what follows." Whitmore didn't speak. She stood. "I was trained for one mission. It just took 30 years to come due." At 10:12, a light wind stirred the flags above Arlington's southern ridge. The morning sun warmed the white stones with an even glow, but the shadows still stretched long between rows. Clara stood at the foot of one slab carved among many, Section 60, Plot 118. Her name was already there. Rank, Unit, KIA, 1992. She didn't blink at it. She had stood here before, years ago, in the quiet hours when no one noticed. But today, the silence meant something different. Whitmore stood to her right, not in uniform, not giving orders, just present. He held a small black box in both hands. When he opened it, the sunlight caught the brushed steel face of a new Hamilton khaki field. Leather strap, 24-hour dial, standard issue, but unworn. She looked at it, then at him. "It's regulation," he said, "mostly." Clara removed the old watch from her left wrist. Her fingers moved carefully, not slow, just steady. When the band slid free, it revealed a pale tan line beneath, thin and unmistakable. She turned the watch once in her hand, then handed it to Whitmore. "Put it with the others. It doesn't belong out there anymore. He didn't argue. He took the old watch and placed it gently inside his coat pocket. She strapped the new one on without comment. No one else was near them, just the wind and the stone. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. They buried me 33 years ago. The only difference now is they know it. Whitmore looked down at the marker. You sure about this? She nodded. This is the last record that still has my name. After this, I'm just echo traffic. He didn't speak again. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't feel like trying to hold her back, and she had already let go. A bird called somewhere down the slope. A pair of boots crunched on gravel in the far distance. Clara didn't move. This is where she ended. The name, the file, the woman who came home. And somewhere else far colder, far deeper someone else would begin again. Whitmore stepped back and gave her a moment. Clara raised her wrist, checked the time, and turned away. At 0447 local, Clara stepped off the back of a logistics truck wearing a civilian Arctic utilities jacket marked for pipeline maintenance. She carried a compact, Russian-labeled tool case and an outdated but valid Level 3 clearance badge cloned from a former energy inspector flagged as deceased in 2012. The perimeter guard at the outer gate yawned once, glanced at the manifest, and waved her through. Inside the checkpoint vestibule, she adjusted the side-mounted radio jammer hidden under her left arm. The device pulsed in 5-second intervals, just enough to garble any outbound surveillance uploads from her immediate vicinity. Security protocols at this compound hadn't evolved much since 2006. The camera dome above the airlock spun lazily and never quite aligned with her ID scan. By 0511, Clara was inside the facility's upper access corridor. She moved with purpose, but not speed. Maintenance workers who rushed drew attention. She counted each turn, following the diagram etched into her memory left at the rusted conduit junction. Second vault door, marked with faded Cyrillic for power transfer. The door guard wore a mismatched uniform with a patched shoulder insignia, likely a local militia conscript. Clara paused 3 meters back, adjusted her badge to the correct orientation, and coughed once throat rough. Measured. When the guard grunted at her, she offered a terse nod and pointed at the inspection tag. No words. No explanation. He waved her past. In the sub-basement, heat radiated through the concrete. She reached the junction panel near node chamber 6. Pulling a folded keycard from her sock, she slid it into the backup access slot. The light blinked yellow, then green. The final door was pressure-sealed. Manual override required dual biometric, but 30 years ago, Clara had carved a bypass into the relay itself. A careful panel lift. A quiet jumper wire bridged from a stripped ground screw to the memory loop. The lock clicked. 0526. She stepped inside the chamber. The air was dry, humming with static. The control node stood in the center, enclosed by a circular interface hatch. She approached it like she was back on training soil, left foot first. Pace silent. Her gloved hands moved with muscle memory. Panel latches, circuit, map, confirmation. She accessed the analog port beneath the primary console and reached into her sleeve. A copper key. She'd carried it for 3 decades. She inserted it, then twisted clockwise. One red diode lit. The system paused, then unlocked. She exhaled, just once. Her radio hissed softly, a direct relay from the emergency channel Whitmore had re-established through encrypted HF. "You're in." "Yeah," she answered. "I'm in. No drama, no panic. Just process." Part 6.2, the final code word count 500. 0529. Clara laid the override script into the main logic port. Her handwriting covered the printed command strip. The ink faded but legible. The analog reader accepted the script line by line, processing each sequence through a built-in voltage translator. She waited for the pulse return to confirm sequence alignment. When it came, it was barely audible, a faint series of soft tones. Each one told her the backdoor code was still intact, that the sabotage had waited this long without being erased. She took one final step forward and removed the small induction clip from her pocket. She fastened it to the coolant regulator just left of the processing bank. When the magnetic latch caught, she paused. This was the point of no return. Clara keyed the last string by hand. 7 digits. No biometric, no fingerprint, just time and precision. Then she lifted the microphone. Package delivered. Whitmore's voice was low, nearly a whisper. Godspeed, Khaki 7. She pressed the final switch. Inside the node, a small current rerouted the internal logic chain. Power faded in one circuit, surged in another. The core system entered recursive lock dead, but not visibly so. From the outside, the deterrent looked functional, but the trigger was blind now, deaf, disarmed. Clara sat down beside the panel. The heat inside the chamber settled on her shoulders like a weight. She checked her watch. No 5:32:14. Her fingers ran along the leather strap. The tan mark on her skin, now slightly deeper from the newer band, reminded her of where it began. Her pulse stayed even. She closed her eyes just for a moment, not to rest, just to remember. The chamber lights dimmed, not out, just quieter, as if the place knew it had done its job. Her last breath was measured, a rhythm, like steps down a hall. She leaned her head back. The watch ticked once more, then stopped, and everything was still.